Hello, hello, my fingerling potatoes of truth and love. Good to see you, good to be here with you. I'm Tad. It is 7 o'clock p.m. California time, and whatever time it may happen to be, wherever you are, and that's all good. It's a big world. We're all allowed to have different times. It's okay. Anyway, I will warn you in advance. I'm finding out all kinds of interesting things. Just got a bunch of, not a bunch, I got a new, what do we call it, a USB hub for all of my USB cords. And for some reason, my camera will only work through a 2.0 hub. And since the new one is all 3.0 USB, forgive the neepery, those of you who don't care about this stuff. For some reason, the reason I got it in the first place was because 3.0 is supposed to be backward compatible, which means it's supposed to work also with 2.0, the old USB standard. But no, I had to now have two different things hooked into my computer so that I can accommodate the camera. And of course, you know, there's no obvious reason for it. I've been fiddling about on the internet looking for reasons why this might be and what might be going on. And either there are no reasons, or the reasons are people guessing that are extremely complicated, weird things to do that you can't actually do with a Macintosh anyway. So anyway, not important, but just to explain my continuing hatred of technology. No, not hatred. I was an early adopter of most of these things. I was working for Apple back in the 1980s and got very interested in what we used to call interactive multimedia, which led me into doing all kinds of things, including an interactive television show that my friend and business partner, Andy Harris, and I did back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And so I've been interested in this stuff for a long, long time, but sometimes it just defeats me. Or at least it beats me by attrition. It just tires me out until I give up. So, but everything seems to be working. Let me know if it's not. That's the only thing I ask. Let me know if this new setup is for some reason not doing what it's supposed to do. And that's all I ask. And I will let you guys help me out with that. Otherwise, I'll be seeing what's going on. I mean, just, you know, assuming it's okay until I hear otherwise. Anyway, hello, everybody. Good to see you. I see Tim has asked a question about anyone seeing the aurora. Just heard from one of our family members who's in Minnesota at the moment, and she says the aurora is way good, and it's been very exciting. I have only been able to follow it from my part of California on live cams. So I have seen it, but, you know, the news and live cams is not the same as being able to be out under the sky and seeing it. But it's still pretty cool, have to say. I've gotten addicted to live cams lately because at night after I've worked and after Deb's gone to sleep, I tend to kind of like just channel surf anyway, and we'll watch a bit of this, bit of that, bit of this, bit of that. Sometimes going back to things, you know, that I was watching half an hour ago to watch more of them or whatever. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because somewhere along the line I suddenly went, you know what I feel like tonight? I feel like doing absolutely nothing but watching something really kind of restful. And so I started flicking around on YouTube looking at live cams. And of course there's a huge variety of them, but most of them are boring as hell. Most of the ones that are set in cities are up on top of somewhere, and you can't actually see people. You just see little ant-like shapes moving around. A lot of the wildlife cams, obviously by the time of the night I'm watching, if they're truly live, it's dark where they are if they're in North America. And a lot of the others are very cute, but they're arranged. You know, they're like little backyard ponds that they've got all kinds of things arranged around them, and so you watch as the occasional squirrel comes out of the trees and sneaks over to take some seeds or something because they've put out seeds. But the one that I found that I really like, not that any of you should care, but just as a piece of information, is there's one of the Namib Desert, of course in the southern part of Africa. And that one's really cool. For one thing, the dawn doesn't come up until like 10 or 11 o'clock California time. So nothing's really going on there during the night. But as soon as the sun comes up, the critters start arriving, and of course they're all African animals of the Namib Desert, and you get quite a wide variety. So there's a lot of gemsbok and wildebeests and other kind of well-known animals in the general antelope family. But I mean, you also get ostriches and giraffes and occasionally wild African dogs and just all kinds of interesting stuff. And that's like, I will actually sit there and just watch that for half an hour at a stretch, even if there's not much happening, just waiting for the next group of animals to come in. Because not only do you get to watch the animals, but you get to see them in a natural habitat with no humans around. Now, the water hole itself is not natural, but it doesn't look weird or anything. They made a water hole, probably out of cement and stuff, out in the middle of the desert. And it's obviously some water is being pumped in from somewhere, probably where the camera is. But the animals, are completely used to it, and there are no people around. And as a result, what you get is really interesting interactions between the animals, both animals from different species, but also within. If you get a small herd of gemsbok or whatever, you can watch the gemsbok themselves dealing with their own social issues between themselves, and which ones are dominant and which ones have to hang back while the dominant ones get water, and what happens if any of them try to come up before their turn. And it's just fascinating. And same thing with the ostriches. I had never had a chance to watch so many ostriches drink before. So that's like one of the things. There's others I like too, and if I think of any of them, I'll mention them. But let me try that again. The Namib Desert is a particularly nice one, and I've enjoyed that very much and will continue to enjoy it. It's particularly good for me, of course, because I stay up really late, till at least 3 in the morning, and so I have several hours of what is daytime in southern Africa, and it's great fun to just kind of, I was going to say be a fly on the wall, but there's no walls. Be a fly near the water hole. Anyway, haven't seen any major carnivores yet. As I said, just the occasional African wild dog. But it's one of the reasons I'm looking. I'm interested to see if any bigger carnivores show up. And I'm also looking for some of the weirder, wilder kinds of herd animals, like elands and things like that were very big in the cultural life of the San Bushmen. And so I'm fascinated by that stuff too, as you can tell from the other land books. Anyway, so that's my babble for the day, I think. I've told everybody last night there's not really a lot else to tell. I'm waiting for the proofs and working on a map sketch for Navigator's Children, but really pretty much done with that for now. Finished up the first draft, or the first redraft of Heirs of Ordinary Farm, and thinking about various other things and getting sort of starting to get ready for going out of town for a couple of weeks, which I've mentioned. And I think that's about it. So anyway, let me check and see who's here. I just got an email or a online message from Yaroslav Barsukov. I assume that's how it's pronounced, or at least close enough. Yaroslav Barsukov, or Barsukov. And thank you, Yaroslav. Very, very nice to hear from you. I appreciate it. And let me see, what else have we got going here? Let's see who else has checked in. Okay. And not many people online right at the moment, but that's okay. Let me say hello to the people who I do know are here, which is Medardo. Hello, sir. Isaac, good to see you as always. Claudia, same. James, my friend James, good to see you. Tim Speckens, hello, Tim. Barb Ann, Kelly, Angie, Emily. Hello, Emily. I dropped you a note on your Facebook page today, so sincere and heartfelt. Ray Weatherford and Kalau, Utah, and Susan Shamblin are all on. And I don't know if Kalau, Utah is a person or a location, but that's cool. Christy, happy birthday to you on Wednesday. So congratulations. We're stumbling toward eternity, but we're having a good time while we're here, and that's what matters. Anyway, Medardo, it's YouTube. Just go on YouTube and just say live live feed or live cams or something like that, and you will get a whole ton of them, and you can sort of pick your way through it. As I said, a lot of them are urban, a lot of them are kind of setups for domestic type local wild animals, squirrels, birds, etc. Some of those are very neat too, and some of them are I can't even quite figure out what the point of them is, but as I said, there are some very cool ones too, and the Namib Desert one is a particular favorite of mine. Oh, Yaroslav, asking you. I will try to remember when I'm not online to get back to you on this. So I did see your. I did see the rest of your DM. So and you had a question in there. So I will check back with you when I remember afterward when I'm not doing this. Okay, and so basically, that's. I think that's it. I'm trying to think if there was anything. I didn't have a whole lot to say last night either because at the moment, life is relatively non-complex. I am still going through many of the crazinesses, or we are going through many of the crazinesses that come from having moved twice in a year and losing both my parents and having to go through the estate stuff and trying to get their house ready to sell and trying to deal with things. And I'm going through a massive contretemps with the DMV. Oh, shock, surprise, right? The DMV. How could anybody have trouble with the DMV? But I literally have had this one issue I've been trying to resolve with them for a car that is not in the state at the moment, so I can't even do anything with the car. It's with one of our young people. But I've had, I swear to God, like 10, 12 visits trying to get this straightened out, and every time I go away thinking it's straightened out, I get some follow-up piece from the DMV saying, oh, sorry, wrong again. And of course, here at home, when I find these messages or get these things in the mail or whatever, I'm like shrieking in rage, like, why didn't you tell me that while I was there? But these small matters are part of we could be out spearing mammoths and gathering nuts and fruit and stuff like that. And instead we work and we live in a complex society, and our complex society is very big on records and lists and the correct associations of this, that, and the other thing. And so we pay the price for it. And yes, it would be easier to just go out and spear some food probably, or gather some food. Might not take as much time as our normal work routine is. But on the other hand, I really like plumbing, so sue me. So, but there are, of course, times when the modern world just seems to be like if you remember in The Simpsons, the Sideshow Bob and the Rake, which, this is the character on The Simpsons, who started out as a second banana for Krusty the Clown and later became one of the main villains of the series, trying to kill Bart Simpson all the time. But there was this ongoing joke with Sideshow Bob that, every time he turned around, he would step on a rake and it would flip up and hit him in the face. And sometimes there'd be like 6 or 7 of them, and he'd hit every single one and kept getting hit in the face. And sometimes our modern society does feel a bit like that, I have to admit. And right now, the DMV is my rake. I am Sideshow Tad, and the DMV is my rake. But anyway, I am not going to spend any more time thinking about it. Instead, I am going to move toward doing my reading. I see a few other people have showed up. I see Janice has showed up, Janice Ann Hampson, if I haven't said hello already. I don't recall, but I don't think I did. I still don't know if Kalau, Utah, or Utah Kalau is a person or a place, but whichever it is, if it's not Isaac, who I already said hello to, who is in Utah, then hello. Nice to have you. Okay, I am going back. Oh, and Becky just showed up. Hello, Becky. And there's Ivan. Hello, Ivan. Ivan and I were in a band for many years ago. Many years ago, Ivan and I were in a band. But our friendship is a little more wide than that, but that's one of the things I always remember with fondness, and I wish we'd been able to keep that particular arrangement going, because Ivan was great fun to work with. Anyway, okay, so with no further ado, right, I am going to start reading again from, come on, just guess, The Witchwood Crown. Right, exactly. And we're 90% of the way through the book now, so I don't think I'm going to get it finished probably before we have to go out of town, which is unfortunate, because then there'll be a two-week lag time. But I am going to keep pitching. I'm going to keep digging. I can't think of the word I was looking for, but I'm going to keep doing whatever it is that I'm doing here. Reading, I guess, for lack of a better term. Okay, so we have just gone through a series of meetings between Morgan and Eolair, who are on a mission for Simon and Miriamel, along with Porto and the trolls, because the trolls are on their way back to their home, but they're accompanying Porto and Morgan especially, and Count Eolair. And they unexpectedly, after thinking that it would never happen, they actually met the Scythi, and the Scythi basically took them and the wounded Scytha, Tanahaya, back to their temporary camp, because the Jau-e-Tinukai, which was the city in the forest that they were living in during the first set of books, was no longer safe for them, and so they have split to what they call the something Gojao, which means the little boats, because Jau-e-Tinukai meant boat on the ocean of trees. So, that said, Morgan got to meet Jiriki and Aditu for the first time, and then they, along with Yejaro, who is the father of Aditu's unborn child, and the Scythi then, after some various other things, which I'm not going to relate because it would take too long, took them back into the forest and down the river, or up the river, and at which point they met Kendrajaro, who is Jiriki and Aditu's uncle, and who is now, for some reason that was being made clear, is the protector of the Scythi, even though it had been kind of more likely that it should have been Jiriki or Aditu. So, and the reason why is because Likimea, Jiriki and Aditu's mother, had been, along with Kendrajaro, waylaid and attacked by mortals, and Kendrajaro had been very badly wounded, and so had Likimea, and she is essentially in something like a coma. Okay, so we've explained all that, and basically Kendrajaro has said, we don't want anything to do with you people. We know it was mortals who attacked us. We know that they were paid with gold that comes from your, Simon and Miriamel, and we know that, and they showed it to them. And we don't want anything to do with you. So Kendrajaro has told them, get the hell out of our forest. And that's where we're starting. Morgan had not wanted to go on this journey into the wilderness, not at all. But as time had passed, he had begun to feel differently. He had been proud to discover that he could sound the ancient Scythi horn, when even noble Count Eolair could not. Later, he had been excited because he, of all people, had drawn out the Scythi with it. That pleasure made it all the more galling now that not only were the hand of the throne and the heir apparent being ignored and dismissed by the immortals, but evil-tempered protector Kendrajaro had even kept the horn. As Jiriki led them back through the forest toward the Erkengard camp, toward Porto and the trolls and the waiting soldiers, Morgan's anger grew. Not only had the Scythi first frightened him, then snubbed him, they had all but made his entire journey pointless. Several weeks riding and sleeping out of doors and many nights' merriment back home missed, and his only reward was to be treated like a beggar by the glorious immortals he had heard so much about. Back at home, they will say the whole trip was wasted, he thought bitterly, and no doubt my grandparents will blame me, since they would never blame their magical Scythi friends or their old comrade Count Eolair. But who are the Scythi, after all is said? They live in the forest without houses, as poor as trappers or charcoal burners. Morgan looked over at Jiriki, and his certainty suffered a little. The Sitha moved like a true wild creature, his strides long, even, and completely silent, while Morgan and Eolair clattered and rustled with each step as they struggled to keep up. As they followed Jiriki, the afternoon passed its crest and began to fail. The forest air that had sparkled with dust motes bright as tiny stars now grew more opaque, and as the sun dropped lower, the first mists rising from the earth gave Aldhort the look of a stream bed seen through moving water. Morgan paid little attention, though. He was full of angry thoughts, with a heaviness in his chest that felt like grief, though no one had died. "Why did we leave the horn?" he demanded suddenly. "My grandparents gave that horn to us. It belonged to Sir Camaris, and he wasn't any Scythy." "It was made by them in the first place, long, long ago," said Eolair, frowning as he struggled over a log that blocked their path. "It was simple courtesy to let them have it again, Highness. And in any case, Tituno is the least of our problems." "I would apologize for my uncle," Jiriki said, "but I think there is blame enough for all, including an ample share for my sister and myself. Even Sailman and Miriamal did not understand what they sought when they tried to make a new peace with my people. We do not change so easily, nor so lightly, and neither do the mortals who fear and hate us. Years of care and much attention were needed, and both were lacking. Now it is likely too late." "Too late?" Eolair asked. "Why?" "When Kendrajaro and our mother were attacked by the mortals we had favored, our clan, the House of Year Dancing, lost favor among the rest of the Zidaya. Kendrajaro, as eldest of the clan, declared himself the house's protector until the threat was finished. All the clans still work together in certain important ways, let us say, but our old shared home, Jawi Tinukai, is now gone. Its name means boat on the ocean of trees, as I think my sister told you. Our clans have now dispersed into many little boats instead. By our ancient traditions, it was the right thing to do." "What I fear," Count Eolair began, but Morgan was tired of listening to other people talk. "Why do all you Scythi let your uncle tell you what to do?" he demanded of Jiriki's back. "How do we know that whatever his name, Kenjardar, didn't do all this himself and blame it on mortals? Prince Morgan!" The Count seemed shocked by this, but Morgan didn't care. Hadn't the old man even considered it? After all, Eolair was the diplomat, supposedly wise in the world's way. "Well, he was the only one who came back to tell the story, wasn't he? And now he's in power, when it used to be the Queen." Morgan thought it seemed quite obvious. "All he'd need is a purse full of new gold pieces so he could claim that these supposed attackers were carrying them." "I apologize for the prince," Eolair said to Jiriki, which only made Morgan angrier. "We came a long way for this meeting, and of course we are disappointed." The Sitha waved his hand. "Peace, Count. We Zidaya are not complete strangers to deceit. In fact, if you know the story of Inaluki's murder of his own father, you know we are no strangers to treachery among our own people either. But I think Prince Morgan speaks before he understands us well enough to judge us." Perhaps. Morgan was not in the mood to be conciliatory, however highly his grandfather and grandmother thought of the fairy folk. "Or perhaps we've been hoping for help that was never going to come to us from these Scythi anyway." "Help?" said Jiriki. "You said something of this before, but I thought you spoke of breaching the distance that yawns between our peoples. What do you mean? What has happened? And why is this the first you have mentioned it? Because your protector, as you call him, did not give me a chance to speak of it, Aelair said, then told Jariki of the attack on the Royal Progress along the North Road, and of the message they had found when the battle had ended. Witchwood crown, Jariki said. That is a very old phrase indeed. What does it mean? Asked Aelair. Is it some weapon or object of power like the swords we sought in the Storm King's War? Jariki made a gesture with clutching fingers as though he tried to grasp something invisible. I wish my sister were here. Aditu is a better student of the elder days than I am and would know more about such things, but Witchwood crown, Ke Jaya in our tongue, has more than one meaning. The most common, at least in elder days, signified all the groves of witchwood trees that were planted when our people first came to the new lands. New lands, said Aelair. This place, Ostenard, as you mortals call it, new because we came here after we fled our old home, the garden. Are there many groves? The Count asked. Are they important? Most of the witchwood trees are dead now, said Jariki, and even for Morgan, unused to Scythy ways, there was no mistaking the bitterness in his voice. Even our sacred groves in Jaue Tinukai failed at last, not long after the Storm King was defeated. The living trees that remain are all in Nakiga with the Hikidaya, so Utuku seeking to capture that witchwood crown makes little sense. But you said the words had other meanings as well, said Aelair. Jariki hesitated, and Morgan wondered whether he was hiding something. We used to bury some of our dead with a crown made of witchwood branches on their caskets or upon their brows. Because of that, it is also the name of a move in the game of Shent. Aelair was struggling to keep up with Jariki's effortless pace, but Morgan could see he was clearly interested. A move? A piece of strategy, do you mean? Could that be the meaning in the message we received? Jariki seemed intent on the path before them. Morgan had decided he did not trust him at all, and was now certain the immortal was hiding something from them. Again, the Sitha said at last, I doubt it could be anything to do with Utuku's goal. In the game of Shent, Witchwood Crown is a means to gain by surrendering, and I cannot think the Queen of the Hikidaya intends surrender. So there's nothing else to be done about the message we received? Aelair asked. The Norn's plans remain a mystery, and your people cannot help us? Will not help us? Morgan thought the old Count sounded quite pathetic, like a man begging for money from a wealthy relative. What will we do if the Norns seek war again? You don't need to ask him, Morgan said. My grandparents will decide what is to be done. Jariki turned toward him, his severe features even more alien in the sharply angled late afternoon light. Gaps in the trees overhead displayed the spreading scarlet of sunset in the sky. But to Morgan's dismay, it was once more in completely the opposite direction from what he thought was west. He was struck suddenly by how far he was from everything he knew, and had to fight against a pang of fearful homesickness. If so, Prince Morgan, your grandparents will not only have to make their own decisions, Jariki answered calmly, but implement them as well. The Zidaya can do nothing because we do not agree among ourselves. He turned to the Lord Steward. Count Aelair, we have almost reached our parting, and I must speak of something else while we can. I am listening. My sister and I sent the envoy Tanahaya to you, but it was completely against Kendra Jaro's wishes, and he would have forbidden it if he could. What happened to her is terrible, but a graver problem disturbs me now. As we discussed, Tanahaya carried one of our witnesses, and so did Sajandi before he was lost. Both those mirrors are now missing. But why would mere Erkenlandish bandits steal such seemingly unimportant trinkets unless they knew their real worth? What is their worth, Chiriki? The Count asked. I know you use them to speak to each other. Is there something more? Can they be used as weapons? Here is where our tongue and yours diverge, I fear. Shadows were filling the forest now. In his dark, plain clothes, Jiriki seemed only a pale, floating half-face. Can a witness be a weapon? Not as such, but they are vastly powerful for all that, and like the precious Witchwood, they are vanishing out of the world. We use them to know each other's minds across distance, and because of that, across time. But in the hands of other less careful users, they can become portals into and out of unknown places, dangerous places. This child's grandfather once innocently looked into mine and found himself face to face with the Norn Queen herself. This child? Morgan hunched his shoulders, struggling to keep his temper. This child? But why would anyone steal such a thing, Jiriki? The Count asked. As you said, how could mere bandits know what they were? I was hoping you might have some idea. Perhaps a rumor among mortals about Scythy objects being sold. Anything that might suggest the attackers had an ordinary reason for taking them, like mere greed. But more and more, I fear that those who attacked Sajandi and Tanahaya, and even those who attacked our mother and uncle, might actually have been seeking their mirrors, not just their lives. Jiriki abruptly halted, sudden and silent as a cat. Look, we are near to the place where you summoned us. You will be with your own people soon. Morgan saw that they had indeed returned to the same part of the forest where he had blown the horn and summoned the Scythy, and at much the same time of day, with the sun sinking behind an unseen horizon and the blue of the sky deepening where it showed through the trees. So there is nothing we can do to convince your people to help us? The Count asked. More importantly, to help your old friends, Simon and Miriamel? Jiriki was somber. My sister is even now singing against the wind, trying to convince Kendra Jaro that your concerns cannot simply be dismissed because he dislikes mortals. And now that I have heard your story of this strange Rimmersman who travels with Norns, and the message he sent to you, I am more than ever convinced that Aditu and I have the right of it. But unless our uncle and the rest of our people change their hearts, we can do nothing. Tell our friends in the Hayhold that I am sorry, Count Eolair. Morgan thought it was bad enough to be rejected, but to be ignored, too, was almost more than he could stand. It made him feel like a child standing beside the table, waiting for the grown-up people to finish their talk. Whose baby does your sister carry, Jiriki? He asked suddenly. Prince Morgan, the Count said. Some tact, please. Don't pretend you weren't wondering, Eolair. Don't blame me because I wasn't afraid to ask. That is not... The Lord Steward broke off at a low flutter of sound from Jiriki. It took a moment for Morgan to understand that the Scytha was laughing, which only irritated him more. Forgive me, Jiriki said. We should have spoken of this earlier. I forgot that among mortals such things are often wrapped in shame and confusion. This one time, at least, Eolair, Prince Morgan is correct. It is not a question that needs to be swallowed. My sister is indeed Chiru, ready to share with the river of our people. In other less complicated days, you would have celebrated it with us, Aelair of Nadmullach, because it is a rare and fine thing. He turned to Morgan. And, although your question is not as important as you think it is, it will be answered, young mortal. Yejaro, our clan cousin, is the father. Are they married? Morgan asked. Jariki smiled. No, it was not, is not, that kind of pairing. We have only a few births each generation, and in our house, this is the first in nearly a century, as you would reckon it. So, of course, everyone was pleased by the tidings. So these were his grandparents, beloved Scythi, Morgan thought and discussed. The magical creatures they always talked about, as though they were angels or even gods upon the earth. Yet they lived in the forest like bandits, could not defend themselves against a small force of mortal attackers, and their royal women bore children out of wedlock without shame or care. He felt cheated. The whole mission had turned out as he had feared, just an excuse to get him out from under his grandparents' feet for a while. When they stopped at the edge of the clearing, a cold breeze came to meet them. They could see late sunset glow through the branches. You have only a little way to walk to reach the open lands where your friends and soldiers must be waiting. Farewell. Farewell, Jariki, said Aolair. I wish our meeting could have been happier. Do not despair. Nobody, not even the wisest, can know all ends. We may meet again in a happier hour. Aolair smiled without conviction. I do not think I have so many hours, Jariki. We do not live as long as you, Scythi. My gods have nearly finished with me on this earth. For a moment, Jariki stood silent. Then he extended a hand and clasped Aolair's. As I said, nobody can know all ends. I hope your gods spare you longer than you suppose. I will pray for your mother's return to health, the Count said, and for the safe birth of your sister's child. Jariki nodded, then turned to Morgan. Faith, he said. The prince was startled. What? Faith in others, Prince Morgan, he repeated. Faith, as Aolair has, that most of your fellow mortals mean well. But you don't believe that. Oh, but I do, said Jariki, and I believe it of my own folk as well. We would not be having this conversation otherwise. The world is full of liars. All the more reason to look for truth and value it when you find it. And do not forget faith in yourself. Faith is all you lack, I think, to make your grandparents proud. Good luck, and farewell, seed of the Hikastaja. Before Morgan could do more than stare and wonder at what his last words meant, Jariki turned and strode away. Within a few moments he had vanished into the forest, as if he had never been there at all. What did he mean? What was the name he called me? I do not know, Highness, said Aolair, but we had better discuss it later. Now we should make our way out into the open grassland as quickly as we can while we have the light. We don't want to spend the night in these woods. Morgan shivered, though he did his best to hide it. I hope Porto's made a fire at least. By the time Morgan and the Count reached the forest fringe, the only trace of the sun was a bright blush along the western horizon. As they emerged from the last tall stands of birch and oak and onto the shrubby slopes leading down to the riverlands, they could see a smattering of fires on the meadow before them, and a tangle of smoke-like scratches against the darkening sky. They hurried toward them, the long grass whispering around their knees, then slowed and stopped. There's no one there, Morgan said. No one waiting. Where have our men gone? Why would they all leave? Aolair looked up and down the plain. Perhaps they are out searching for us. Time among the fairy folk is said to be different. Perhaps we have been away longer than we suspect." He leaned forward, squinting now. "My eyes are too old to make out much from so far away. Do you see anyone moving?" "Nothing. Nobody." As they drew nearer to the silent camp, Morgan felt himself go cold all over, though the summer evening was warm and there was scarcely any breeze on the meadow. He could hear the river just a short way ahead, though it was too dark now to see more than a line across the grass. Most of the fires had burned down almost to coals, but they were not, as Morgan had first thought, deserted cook fires or the abandoned campfires of sentry posts. When they reached the first fire, they saw the last flames were feeding wearily on splintered wheels and blackened poles. "That was the supply wagon," said Morgan. Even to his own ears, his voice sounded like a dead man's, a ghost in an old folk tale predicting doom. "By the sacred tree, what happened here?" Eolair walked to the far side of the burning wagon and stood looking down. After a moment, Morgan went to join him and almost stepped on the body lying at the Count's feet. "Oh, Adon, preserve us," the prince said, then turned away. "His guts are out. There are 3 dead men here altogether." Morgan was surprised by the steadiness of the old man's voice. The prince felt himself only a step or two from madness and terror. All around them stretched the empty grasslands. "And a dead horse, too." "But who could do this?" Morgan asked. "These were Erkengards." It still did not seem remotely real. "And where are the rest?" But Eolair did not answer. After a moment, the prince looked up and saw Eolair was staring out across the grassland to the north. Morgan turned and saw a troop of armored men on horseback, several dozen at least, riding along the edge of the forest toward them. Are they ours?" said Eolair, but the Count did not sound hopeful. "My eyes are not strong enough. Can you tell?" Morgan squinted. He could feel his blood pounding in his head. "They have no insignia I can see. No banners either. And all of them are wearing different kinds of armor." Even as he looked, the nearest of the riders spotted them, and suddenly the whole force was riding toward them, waving axes and spears above their heads. "Bagba, bite me!" Eolair cursed. "Drithings, man! Or bandits!" He grabbed Morgan's arm and gave him a push. "Run, my prince, run to the forest!" "Are you mad?" Morgan had already drawn his sword. I can't leave you." "You can and will. Curse your stubbornness. You are the heir to the high throne. Young man, it is my duty to keep you safe. My life is nothing to that. Run to the forest and hide there. If I survive, I will come and call for you. If I do not, well, try to find the Scythia again. Go!" "No, I won't." The drumming of the attackers' hooves grew louder as the horsemen swept toward them like a thunderstorm, only a couple of arrows' flights away and closing quickly. Eolair shoved Morgan again so hard that he almost stumbled and fell. The Count had his own long, slender sword in his hand now. "By Mercha's bloody stump, if you do not run, Prince Morgan, I swear I will kill you myself before letting the Thrithings men take you. Some of the clans burn prisoners alive." Morgan took a step toward the forest fringe, then another, but he could not imagine leaving the old man to die. "Come, we'll both run." "I would never reach it," the Count said. "I am too slow. No, you must escape." "But I am a prince." "Fire does not care about such things," Eolair cried, "and neither does a thrithing spear." Morgan could see little in the twilight but the Count's pale face. "Run! Curse you, boy, run!" Furious and terrified, caught between two impossible choices, Morgan at last turned and sprinted toward the trees. At the edge of the forest, dodging through a stand of ash trees, he slowed and turned to look back. The grassy plain was all but dark now, but he could see that the horsemen had almost reached Aolair. The old count waited, almost patiently, as they began to surround him, but Morgan could also see that several of the horsemen had broken off from the main group and were now heading up the sloping meadow toward where he stood watching. For the briefest of moments he considered turning to meet them, contemplated a heroic, although likely unknown and unsung death. Then a sudden thought of Lilia came to him, of her serious little face, and he could not imagine how she would bear the news. Born without a father, and now her brother gone too? He could not do that to her, not by choice. Morgan turned and hurried on up the slope, through the grove of ash trees, tripping on shrubs and tangling grasses as he reached the darkness of the forest. Within moments the light was mostly gone, and he had to slow down to little more than a walk. But for all he knew, the Thrithings men who were chasing him knew the forest well, so he kept moving, and did not stop until his legs and arms were so scratched and aching he did not think he could take another step. As he stood trying to catch his breath without making too much noise, he listened for the sound of his pursuers, but could hear nothing except the pounding of his own heart. After a moment he realized he was standing beneath a large tree, its trunk many times wider than he was. From the knobbly feel of its bark, he guessed it was an oak. If I can get up into it, I can rest, he thought. The men chasing me don't have dogs. At least I didn't see or hear any. They won't find me if I'm hidden up in the branches. He wondered what had happened to poor Aolair, alone against a company of mounted men, but it felt too freshly raw and painful, so he felt around for a suitable branch instead, then began to climb. He had made his way a bit more than twice his own height off the ground when he reached the first great spread of branches. He worked himself a little higher up the tree until he had found a wide place where several of the larger limbs came together, then seated himself with his back against the rough trunk. He listened again, but heard no sounds of pursuit, no sounds at all except the rapid buzz of a nightjar and the wind sighing through the treetops high above his head. At last, frightened but exhausted, he dozed, dreaming of black butterflies and a cloud so dense it threatened to choke him. When he woke, he could see the 3/4 moon high in the sky above like a midsummer mask peeping through the branches, and he wondered how long he had slept and why he was in a tree. Then the entire horrible truth came back to him, and for a moment he wanted nothing so much as to cry like a child and then be comforted. But there was nobody to comfort him. He was alone, in the dark, in the forest. Something brushed the back of his neck and the side of his face, a branch or some leaves. It happened again, and he was about to reach up and push it away when he realized by its movement that it was not leaves or twigs, but something altogether different, something alive. He went deadly still, fearing some venomous thing, spider or serpent. When he realized it was neither, his heart did not slow, but began to race even faster, rattling like the nightjar's call. A hand was gently exploring his goose-pimpling skin, a hand with long, tickling fingers so thin and so cold they might have belonged to a starveling child. Chapter 52, Homecoming. Where is my soup? Bring me soup! Despite the reedy thinness of his voice and the relative immensity of the wagon, it was actually 2 wagons joined together, the old man's words seemed always to come to her from a mere hand's breadth away. Hiara said a prayer for patience to the grass thunderer, and just to be careful, one to the stone dweller's martyred Adon as well. It's not ready yet, she said. It's still warming. I don't care. It's warm enough. It is not warm enough. As soon as you get it, you'll be complaining, so you can wait. I should have pulled that spiteful tongue out of your head long ago. It was all she could do not to reply with something really unpleasant. She no longer feared the old man, but she did fear her husband, who was quick with a blow or even a kick, and always took her father's side. Her older sister saw her frustration and nodded toward the wagon's main door. Go outside, Chiara. Take the more yerut and bring in the bowls. I'll deal with this old fool. Grateful, Chiara wiped her hands on her rough apron and went outside. Her husband was out checking the paddocks to make sure the animals were secure, but the rest of his men, relatives, and hangers-on had finished their work and were gathered around the fire, waiting for the thane to return. Her husband's cousin, Cudberge, who, for at least this moment, was the most important man in the compound, was holding forth about something that Chiara felt sure he knew little about. Her husband might be a brute. She might dream of him being gored by a bull or killed in a raid on one of the Erkenlandish settlements, but at least he was not a blatherer like his cousin. There you are, Cudberge shouted when she stepped down from the wagon. Bring us more drink, woman. My friends are thirsty. I've sent our son to fetch more, Chiara said. You and the others have drained what we have, and my husband will want some when he gets back. The trees around the camp were full of crows, more than Chiara had seen gather at once in a long while. She thought they were much like her husband's men, useless and loud. Well then, said another man, a young idiot with mustaches that almost reached his collarbone. If you know your root, give us a kiss. Cudberge laughed loudly at this. You better hope my cousin the Thane doesn't hear you say that to his wife, or he'll have your guts for stirrups. Chiara couldn't decide which she'd enjoy more at that moment, not being the Thane's wife, or getting to see the Thane make stirrups out of the young fool's innards. When the boy comes back with the jug, she said, make sure you leave enough for my husband, or he'll spill the offal out of all of you. Didn't I tell you? Cudberge slapped his leg and chortled. Didn't I say she had a sharp tongue on her? And her older sister is worse. The women in this family are part snake, I tell you. Chiara didn't say anything, but concentrated on picking up the bowls and spoons that had been discarded without a second thought all over the area around the fire. Everybody thought that because she was the Thane's wife, with the largest wagon and the largest camp, her life must be enviable. But the largest wagon and camp needed the most work to keep them tidy, and her husband, his cousins, and her ancient father were like spoiled children, leaving messes and breakage behind them wherever they went. As she thought of the heedless men she had to deal with every day, Chiara felt the darkness begin to flow over her again, as though clouds had swallowed the sun, even though the summer twilight was clear and cloudless. Sometimes the feeling was so strong that it was all she could do not to fall down and weep, to lie helpless and unmoving until the men dragged her away and ended her uselessness, as though she were a horse with a broken leg. Her sister knew this fearful, hopeless darkness too, although neither of them spoke of it. The two of them carried the secret between them, and if nothing made it stop, at least it was a tiny bit easier for Chiara, knowing she was not the only one. She stood up, stacking the bowls she had just found onto the others she had gathered, and saw that someone was approaching the camp. A man of good size, but too slender to be her burly husband. She shaded her eyes against the setting sun, but still did not recognize him, though something about the way he moved caught her attention. The newcomer did not walk so much as he loped, body balanced, head steady, like a wolf calmly pacing a herd of deer. Cudberge saw him too, and stood up, his hand falling to the axe hung on his belt. A few of the other men saw this sudden movement and looked up. Kiara could feel a certain tightness in the air suddenly. A stranger was a rare thing on the High Thrivings. The man stopped a dozen paces from the fire and calmly examined the half-dozen men sitting there. The stranger was tall and well-muscled, but not as broad as Cudburge or the others, and certainly nowhere near as burly as Chiara's own husband, the Thane of the Stallion clan. "I look for the camp of Thane Ficalmij," he said. "Is this it?" "Why?" Cudburge demanded. He had his axe out and was stroking it as though currying a prize horse. "Who are you to walk into the March Thane's camp so bold? I do not know your face, nor does any other man here. And you wear no clan badge." "My name is not important," the stranger said. "Until a short time ago, I was part of the Crane clan, from south of the Little Feather, down in the Lake Thrivings. They called me Unver, but I have left them now. I have no clan." "No clan?" Cudburge shook his head and spat into the fire. "You might as well say you have no heart, no cock. What kind of man renounces his clan?" "A man whose clan treats him badly." The tall stranger had dark hair like a clansman, but even in the late daylight, Chiara could see that his eyes were unusually pale, like someone from the far north, but more gray than blue. Something else about him caught her attention, too, something about his long, narrow face that seemed almost familiar. "But my leave-taking was not a pleasant one," he went on, "and my mood is still foul. So do not keep me standing here when I have asked you a question. Is this the camp of Thane Ficalmij?" He looked past the men to the wagon. "Is that his?" He began to walk toward the steps, but Cudburge stepped out to block his path. "Turn around," Cudburge said, hefting his axe. He might have been no match for his cousin, the March Thane, but he was still a dangerous man. "Turn around, or I will send you back to those Crane clan cowards in pieces." The stranger ignored him and tried to walk past. Cudburge let out a hiss of rage and grabbed at the stranger's arm, at the same time drawing back his axe to deal what would no doubt have been a mortal blow. But instead, the dark-haired man grabbed Cudburge's wrist and pivoted, twisting the arm until Cudburge shrieked in astonished pain and dropped his weapon. A moment later, the stranger's fist hit him full in the face, knocking him to the ground as though he had been slaughtered with a horse maul. The others leaped up to attack the stranger, but within a time so short it seemed to Chiara like some kind of magical vision. They were nearly all down, one with his head rammed between the spokes of the nearest wagon wheel, another with his jaw clacked violently shut by a blow from the stranger's knee. A third managed to swing his curved sword once, but by the time he brought it around, the stranger was no longer where he had been. Instead, he kicked the swordsman hard behind the knee, then again in the other knee, so that the man dropped his sword and fell to the ground, howling and clutching his injured joints. The last of Cudburge's companions had seen enough and did not attack the stranger, but sprinted away from the wagons, probably to find Chiara's husband, the Thane. During the fighting, Chiara herself had climbed up onto the wagon steps, and now she blocked the stranger's way. "Do you mean harm to the women or children here?" she asked. "We will fight you if we must." "I do not hurt women," he growled. "I do not hurt children. I want answers only. I seek my mother, the woman called Vorsheva." "By all the gods and all the saints of sacred Mother Church!" Chiara was so astounded she muddled her prayers together again. "Vorsheva! You are my sister's child?" He looked at her, not particularly interested. The familiar thing she had noticed was now much plainer. A likeness in the eyes, in the hawk-like nose and strong jaw that could only have come from her own family's blood. "So I've been told. Is she still alive?" "She is alive, and she's here, said Yara. By the thunder, I do not know what to say. A sudden thought came. But if you wish to speak to her, you had better be fast. They will bring back my husband any moment now, and he will be angry. You must leave before he gets here. He is a terrible man. No, said the stranger, and his face suddenly went hard, as her sister's face sometimes went hard. It was like seeing a ghost. Your husband is strong, perhaps, or cruel, or even dangerous, but those are not the same thing. I don't understand, she said, but she fumbled off the latch and pushed the wagon's door open. What do you mean? His look suddenly made her feel sick to his stomach. He was so cold, so terribly, hopelessly angry. I am what a truly terrible man looks like. He vaulted up the steps and pushed his way into the wagon. And since we're in the middle of a section, that's where we're going to stop. It's also a minute after 8. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up for this weekend. And hello, Becca. Good to see you. Nobody needs to apologize. Kristen never needs to apologize. Nobody needs to apologize for showing up late. There's Tiffany. Hello, Tiffany. You are all most welcome. Anytime, any place, any way, anyhow. Anyway, so I am going to wrap it up. I will, as far as I know, barring fire or flood, I will be back next weekend and probably, I think, also the weekend after that. And then we're going to be going out of town. So as far as I know, it should be 2 more weekends that we have to read. We might even finish. I might do an extra long reading just to see. Anyway, but that is not what I want to say right now. What I want to say right now is thank you so much, as always, for joining me. It's a pleasure. It's a heartwarm. It's a warm fuzzy. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, darlings. So thank you for that. And take good care of yourselves, your loved ones, your family, your near and dear, but also keep an eye out for people around you that might need a little something, even if it's just a smile or a kind word. With that, I say peace, and I mean it. Peace to everybody. Peace for all of us. Take care. Be good. And I will see you very soon. Ciao, Bambini.